আমরা করব জয়। আজকে অনুষ্ঠানটা নিয়ে আমি এসেছি জুলি। আমাদের সাথে আজকে স্পেশাল গেস্ট গ্যারি জার্নফেল্ড। আমাদের আজকে অনুষ্ঠানে প্রাইমারি ফোকাস হচ্ছে হাউ টু ডিল উইথ লস। আপনাদের আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি। Gary, welcome to our show once again.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. We wanted to talk a little bit about loss.
Okay.
And how do we process loss? And the different types of loss, and so
I'm sitting here looking pensive. Loss is such a huge topic. It evokes so many things. What is it that we've lost? And so it could be a near loved one, someone of a similar age. It can be an elder. It could be a child. It could be an opportunity. It could be as an immigrant, as a newcomer, where we used to be. So loss is a huge subject, and how it impacts us depends on the nature of the loss, our relationship to it, and our supports. Our supports would we have in place? So is there a place that you would like me to start?
Let's start with loss of loved ones, because that's predominantly one of the hardest losses to overcome.
Yeah, and even in talking about loss of a loved one, many people will assume that it was a good relationship. And I got to tell you, I've met with some people who've come to discuss with me their loss, not because that they were grieving. They were actually elated. Not a good relationship, might have been abusive, and we could be talking about a parent, we could be talking about a partner, where because they're actually pleased for the loss, they're now in conflict with other family or society, because the expectation is we have to be so upset, distraught, grieving. So the truth of the matter is, loss will be experienced so differently depending on the context.
So there's a sense of guilt that they're feeling a bit relieved.
Yes,
Okay.
and that they in a sense have to hide that, and how do they manage that? And part of what we talk about is the ability to be authentic and transparent in your loss. Whatever that, however you experience that loss. So there may be an expectation that you be sad and mournful and whatnot, and maybe you have to be more transparent and say, I'm not experiencing the loss that way. For me, it may be relief. And by the way, if it was an elder who was infirmed and a good relationship, you may be grieving and mourning that that person has passed, and you may be feeling relief for their sake, because they're no longer suffering. So, losing a someone and the impact so depends on that relationship and our stage of life. My father died at age 60. I was 26 years of age. His parents, my grandparents, were still with us. So I lose a father, they lose a son. That's also a special kind of loss. Our children are not supposed to predecease us.
Right.
And then depending on the age, that sense of loss can be felt more acutely. If it truly is a teenager, a young adult, a child, we look at that loss and say it's felt more harshly, in a sense. I'm floundering for a word for harsh, but more impactfully, because children should have we expect them to have a long life. It may be a miscarriage at any stage. A lot of people don't understand and appreciate that too is a profound loss. Our society today doesn't always allow parents to mourn the loss of a miscarriage.
Yes.
And so a loss is a loss is a loss. So here I am trying to talk about ever so quickly the various kinds of losses, and depending on our stage of life and our relationship to the lost one, it will be experienced so differently. And I guess the common denominator to all of that, or the ability to cope, again, so much depends on one's ability to be transparent and authentic. So let's say it is a miscarriage. Some people, well, the child wasn't born yet. That is so wrong to say. But to still connect with that person and empathize and wonder and be curious, how are you with this loss? What does it mean for you? And then we may learn something about the individual. The loss through miscarriage, the loss of a child, we don't just lose that person in the moment, we lose the idea of who that person would have become.
Yeah.
When in 5 years hence, when we would think maybe this child would have been entering into kindergarten, there's a sense of loss reestablished because I'm thinking of where this child would have been at this stage of life, and I relived the loss. So as I speak of loss, it is far more complex than the immediacy in which the loss occurs. The immediacy is often felt for many folks where it's been a good relationship, where we've truly cared. It's met with tremendous anguish, an overwhelming sense of pain, sometimes despair. And it's hard to think, it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to get past that. Being Jewish, I don't know culturally what you do from a Muslim perspective, but being Jewish, we have structures in place to facilitate our coping and integrating the loss. Notice I don't say get over.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Get over is a...
Oh, I find that, I find it disrespectful.
Yeah.
We don't get over, we integrate the loss. We internalize, and what does it mean for us, and how do I extract meaning from that, such that I can continue to live, not get over. So in Judaism, we bury our dead within 24 hours. We mourn the passing of that person intensely for 7 days. We call it Shiva. People will come over. We're not to shave. The women, you're not to wear makeup. We cover the mirrors because we're truly concentrating on the loss. After 7 days, and our meals are prepared for us, we just concentrate on our mourning, remembering the departed. And that continues in a lesser degree for 30 days, and then in a lesser degree till the anniversary of the passing, we call Yurtzeit. So in Judaism, we have structures in place to help us integrate and manage the intensity of feelings over time as we grapple with this loss, the sense of mourning. So people watching us, people listening to us, they've got to know that everyone will experience loss and grief uniquely. And whatever your experience is, that's okay. You don't need the overlay to say, no, it should look like this or it should look like that. This is your experience. And we all need to be allowed time to, in a sense, heal from that loss, integrate the experience, and come to a personal understanding of sometimes even the meaning of life. Loss does all of this to us emotionally, psychologically. I've really gone on, but because I attach to this subject, because who amongst us hasn't had loss?
Yeah. So on a personal level, Gary, how did you mourn the loss of your father at a fairly young age?
I was 26-ish. Wow, if memory serves me right. With the passage of time, the numbers, you forget them.
Right.
So how did I deal with it? My father and I happened to be very close. He had been ill for 3 years prior. I was in fact trained to take care of him in our home. It doesn't mean that I wasn't able to get out, but I'd have to be home 1 or twice a day to help him with dressings and his care. And when you do that with a person and you're touching them regularly, you get very close, very connected. When he passed away, I was totally overwhelmed. In my grief, I wasn't able to extend myself and actually think about my mother, who was in her, mid to late 50s at the time of her husband's passing. And they actually had a dear relationship, an absolutely dear relationship. And she's 95 now, and we still chat, and we love each other, and we still see each other, and we get along. But it's not until this time of her life that she's been able to actually reflect back to me the impact of her husband, my dad's loss, upon her. And as she did that, I felt a little sad that I was not in touch with what was going on for her then. That's the nature of anguish, though. That is the nature of loss. It causes us to be very insular when we're in so much pain. We have to be forgiving of those who, in their loss, may not be able to carry through. That's why we are there to support them.
And you have a community set up or a family set up so they can support you.
Yeah, there's an expectation culturally.
Yeah.
There is.
And rightfully so, because
Yeah.
when you're in that space and time, you need people to be there,
yes.
to listen.
And so to avail yourself of that, to be open to that, I have to assume that in your community,
yes,
there are structures in place, expectations, social norms for how we're going to help someone in our community deal with their loss.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we do a really good job at during the time where we're at the burial, the first few weeks perhaps
Yes.
even, and then we don't know what to do. We don't want to talk about that person because it's going to bring up painful memories or stir up memories that perhaps but I think it's good to celebrate and continue to celebrate that person's life and relive the memories.
You raise some really great points with that, because I'm asked, at holiday times, do we talk about the departed? Do I raise that to their widow? Do we talk? Because if I do, might I be opening a wound? And rather than internalizing and wondering, should I, shouldn't I, speak with the person you're concerned about. Say, I'm not sure how you feel at this time of your, given the loss of, and whether or not that is something you want to talk about. I don't know how you feel if I bring up that person's memory by talking about how they used to participate in our get-togethers.
Yeah.
And so by reaching out to the person, you get the benefit of their thinking, of what will work for them. And in being respectful, follow through with their wishes. It makes it a lot easier when we have the dialogue and we don't sit in fear of opening something up. We do this empathetically. We're not banging on your door.
Yeah.
We're doing it supportively. Can we talk about this? I don't know if that's something that you're comfortable with.
We're going on a short break. We'll be with you soon. And we're back and continuing our conversation with Gary. So welcome back, Gary. Wanted to briefly talk about a loss and the loss of a child and how families can cope with that. I know it's a big one.
The person in me thinks, how do you ever manage that? I haven't had the experience. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. but there are members of any community who have to cope with the loss of a child. It's not uncommon for the grief to be so severe that it breaks apart families. If you are experiencing the loss of a child, we do truly want you to consider speaking with a counselor. Some losses are just so severe that to think that we're going to manage them on our own isn't realistic. We need supports in place.
And especially, you know, community members with the best of intentions don't have the tools. It's like me calling on you, a friend, to come and help me build a house.
Oh yeah,
And you have
yeah, forget that.
no expertise.
Forget that,
right?
exactly.
So,
And it's not about knowing what to say or not say. Sometimes being with a counselor, it's about being in a safe emotional space where the person experiencing the loss can comfortably just experience their grief. And so we want to provide, you know, our language, a safe holding space to allow that person to feel and mourn. If you are a friend of this person or an, you know, extended kin, don't worry about talking the person out of or seeking to cheer them up. They should be in pain. That pain is respectful of their lost one. I love this person. They are of me. I should feel pain. We have to accept that in others. And sometimes when we see in others anguish, it is uncomfortable for us. And so we have to find a way to be comfortable for them, to provide that emotional safety, that place where they can own their loss and their anguish. There are other losses when it comes to children. It could be illness. It could be accident where the child is still with us. It can be learning that your child has a developmental disability. These two are losses. We refer to them as sometimes ambiguous losses because the person's there. And look, the other end of the spectrum is dementia with our loved one. The person is there, but they're not there in the way that they used to be.
Yeah.
And so this is an ambiguous loss because the person is there, the expectation, the memory, the way they were, our fantasy of how things would go forward, those are the things that are gone. And to hold that in and to recognize that and to cope with that, there too, we need help sometimes. We need to reach out. And it, you know, man, wife, gender neutral perspective, however you identify, quite frankly, we're all born human first. Period. And we all need support. And these are particular times in our lives where that support becomes more important. And it's also a time in our life where it may be more difficult to reach out. So again, if you are a friend, if you are a loved one, you know, some of the things that we can do to help on that friendly basis is to check in, is to offer to go with. I recently went with a friend to their physician as they were coping with their personal problems. I felt that without my making the overture saying, let me go with you, the person wouldn't have access services. So these are ways that we as a community can be there to support. We have to realize that there's an acute phase of loss and then a less acute phase, and we have to be there for the less acute phase as well. You know, after the funeral, after the mourning, after the rites of passage have been gone through, the loss continues. We have to keep in touch. How are you 2 months hence, 6 months hence, a year's hence? We don't want to leave that person alone. We want to keep the connections. When we think of healing, those factors that facilitate emotional, psychological healing have to do with connection. The closer we are, the more in touch, the more empathetic, typically we all perform at a higher level of sophistication, of capability, of capacity. So keep those connections. Follow up on your friends. Follow up on your loved ones. Don't push, but don't accept no for an answer either. Can I drop by? Can we go for a coffee? You know, someone experienced such a profound loss, as particularly that as a child. It's not uncommon for that person to want to sequester themselves, to hide, to be overtaken. And it's not like we're trying to push them out of that or into anything else. We're just keeping the connections. This is, you know, like a life preserver, a lifeline to help them stay afloat.
Yeah. And I know you talked about your mother and how she, you know, like that was a key to her dealing with her loss of her husband.
Staying
by
connected. She was part of a bereavement group. And as a result of that, she was also asked, would you be there as a volunteer for others who are bereaved to help them go through that? The degree to which, and this is really interesting, that if we're feeling the pain, the loss, as we give to others, as we share of ourselves, that too is a sophisticated coping mechanism. It helps us look beyond ourselves and the immediacy of our pain. And that is a strategy whereby we can be connected to others meaningfully.
And your mother is 95?
Oh, she's 95. She's amazing. Yeah. She still drives.
Wow.
We're not worried about her driving. She's self-selecting. She's not going to get on a major highway, but go within her community. She, several years ago, got a certificate for 70 years of continuous volunteer work. And just last week, she was telling me of her experience at a local restaurant where she got members of her volunteer group, about a dozen of them, between the ages of 93 and 100. They all went out for lunch to still discuss their volunteer activity. Wow!
That's
Wow!
inspirational.
And she will tell you, as will I, that this enables life. There isn't anyone amongst us who isn't faced with adversity. I don't care who you are. The adversity may differ. It will come into our lives at different times. The degree to which we're connected, the degree to which we are giving and of service to others, helps us all manage that adversity. So I encourage people, be transparent, be authentic, connect, and with that, we typically have more satisfying lives.
That's so profound and really hopeful. And I know that Ontario schools are set up in a way where we have those expectations of the 40 hours.
Yes, the high school
minimum.
Students to graduate must put in 40 hours.
Yeah.
Parents, I encourage you to make that meaningful to your child. Look, volunteer work doesn't have to be a drudgery, by the way, and where you choose to volunteer should be of interest to you as well. So if your child in high school is looking to volunteer for something that the child absolutely hates, that's not a good experience.
Yeah.
That's not learning about altruism. So if you can help your child, or if your child finds something where it fits with their interest, it's a win-win. And volunteerism can provide for that win-win and a remarkable experience. It gets us out of being egocentric and it helps us cope.
Giving back. And I hear that your dog also has accrued some voluntary hours.
We have a 10-year-old cockapoo, and he was certified as a therapy dog through St. John Ambulance Therapy Dog Program. He's retired from the program a year ago. Up until that year, he had over 300 visits to his credit to seniors' residences, colleges and universities. And let me tell you, a very well-behaved, well-mannered, well-received little boy who would light up the people who would otherwise be in distress. He brought a moment of distraction to their lives.
Wow.
And I got to admit, I had to take our dog there for him to do his duties. So my wife and I participated. This was our volunteer activity. And it just is so self-fulfilling. And when we're dealing with our own adversity, when we're dealing with our own loss, and we can give to others, we get so much out of it too. So I'm encouraging people of any community. There's so many opportunities to avail yourself of. It helps us cope.
Yeah, and I think when we think about charity, we go right to like, can you give me some money, right? But then, the time that you choose to spend to give to others is so much more gratifying. And it goes beyond race, religion, culture.
Correct.
And to give back to the community that you're at, or wherever you choose, just to give back is such.
And when or how.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an ongoing commitment. It could be intermittent. It could be something comes up and you think, you know what, that is an activity that I can pitch in with. It could be around a cultural event to enable that for the community. Say, I've never helped out at this gathering. Can I do something to help out for the gathering? Rarely would anyone tell you no.
Right.
Now you're a part. Now you're participating. Now you're feeling better about yourself. You're learning. You're connecting. So I encourage volunteerism tremendously.
Yeah, and I think it also has a sense of connection, right? Like you were talking about being part of something greater than, me just working for the Bangladeshi community. It goes beyond that, right?
And if I want to learn about your community, what a better way than to volunteer within it?
Yeah.
That's why I'm on your TV channel.
That's right.
So this is a cross-cultural opportunity for us both to not only learn generally what is helpful to everyone, but to demonstrate we can learn from each other. Right. We all have something to give each other.
That's right. Gary, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And I am so glad that we are starting this conversation about overall well-being and mental health. And thank you for staying with us. Abar dekha hobe, bhalo thakun.